Thanks to the amazing folks over at Ameda City through the Predecessor Creators Guild, I've been given an opportunity to take a first look at Predecessor's upcoming patch, patch 1.4. This patch is absolutely massive and has some changes for every single hero in the game. It's also going to bring us our next Predecessor hero, Boris, who's going to be charging his way into Sanctuary. We got a lot to cover in this patch, so let's get to it. Serath is an assassin, bruiser style, high risk, high reward hero that's played primarily in the jungle, but can be played in off lane as well. They've got a couple of changes that have come her way in patch 1.4, and we're going to talk about those now. The first change is to her primary ability, Heaven's Fury. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Serath, this is the ability that allows her to select an enemy, vanish from her location, and have 5 instances of damage around the enemy. These instances of damage do a certain amount of damage, and they also apply on-hit effects at 75% effectiveness. Additional strikes against the same target deal 30% damage. They've changed this ability a little bit in this patch, which is you are fully damage and crowd control immune during the cast. So wise and well-timed use of this ability can really extend a fight and put Serath on top of a questionable outcome or even a losing fight, because she's going to be invisible and untargetable and undamageable while she is in this ability. They've also increased the bonus damage to monsters, but they have lowered the base damage early on this ability. They've increased the scaling damage, and as I mentioned, they have increased the on-hit percentage. Previously, it was not 75%. The next change is to her secondary ability, Ascend. Now, for this ability, Serath jumps in or flies into the sky and is given a certain amount of time to select an area below her to dash down to and deal damage. With this ability, they have lowered the base damage, they have increased the scaling damage, they have increased the cooldown, but they've lowered the resource cost later in the game. So a little bit of the damage shifted to the late game with Ascend. Now, thankfully, Ascend wasn't ever really used primarily as a damage tool for her. Of course, I won't say that people didn't use it to damage, but it wasn't the main go-to for damaging and finishing a fight. The next change is to her alternate ability, Chastise. This is an ability where Serath flaps her wings and sends a kind of a torrent of wind out in front of her that deals damage to enemies in front of her. They've lowered the base damage of this ability, and they have changed the way this ability's damage scales through the game. It used to be a fixed 80 scale. Now it's going to be 80 to 100% depending on what level you have this ability. They've increased the slow to a 35% slow for 2 seconds. They've increased the cooldown, and they have lowered the resource cost of this ability. The last change is to her ultimate ability, Heresy. They've lowered the burn base damage later in the game. Now, the standout to me is that they've made her other abilities better in the late game, so maybe they were thinking they needed to round out her kit a little bit with this. But for those of you who are unaware, Heresy is kind of the bread and butter of Serath's kit. It's what makes her so great at dueling people. She takes a demonic form, and in this form, she gains movement speed and attack speed, and she sets enemies on fire with her true damage dealing basic attacks. It's that burn base damage that they have lowered in this ability. So let me know what you guys think about the changes that they have brought to Serath in this patch, and whether or not you plan on picking her up in patch 1.4.